Hello, hello, and welcome back to Shelf Talks, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys of female founders bringing their product based businesses to retail shelves. I'm your host, Roberta, and today I'm excited to be joined by Alysa Seeland, founder of Fond Regenerative. Alysa has built a brand rooted in the belief that wellness starts with nourishing the body through real, thoughtful sourced ingredients. By really embracing regenerative agriculture and creating products with purpose, she's proving that businesses can care for both people and the planet while building a loyal community of customers. In today's conversation, we'll talk about what inspired Alysa to launch Fond Regenerative, the lessons she's learned while growing the business, what it takes to build a mission-driven brand, and her journey navigating the world of retail. We're also going to dive into the challenges, the wins, and a lot of the advice that she has for founders who dream of seeing their products on store shelves. If you're building a consumer brand, hoping to break into retail, or simply love hearing the stories behind innovative founders, you're really going to enjoy this conversation. Let's dive in. Welcome to Shelf Talks, Alysa. So happy to have you here today.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. So I am really excited to hear about your journey. So let's just dive in from the beginning. Would love to know what life was like for you before even starting a brand.
Yes, so I have always had an entrepreneurial background. So my mom ran her own business. My dad ran his own business for a long time. And so that was not new to me. My grandparents are farmers and which is owning their own business and still do that to this day. And so I was used to this sort of atypical way of doing things, right? But hadn't found my thing yet. And so I was working at an early stage tech startup in Boston and then eventually virtually. So my husband got a job at Texas State University and I was working virtually for the tech startup. And my role at the time shifted to working as a ghostwriter for a VC firm. And so that is where I got my unconventional MBA, right? Where I was indoctrinated in all of this rich knowledge in how to be a founder, what sets apart, good founders from great founders. How do you know you have an idea worth pursuing? What are investors looking for when they look at ideas? And so I got to listen to just hours of these investors talking and then regurgitate that in their voice and was, able to ghostwrite for places like Inc.com and Forbes. And so that really, it's an unconventional, introduction. But it really helped me to know. So when I had the idea for Fond was my fourth or fifth business idea. I had this very traumatic experience, 5 months postpartum. I end up needing emergency surgery, and the post-op, the surgeon tells me I'm going to need to have another procedure in 3 to 6 months. And I declined to schedule that procedure, but knew I had a little bit of a time clock that I was running against, right? And so I found the book Nourishing Traditions. It had actually been given to me as a wedding present. I didn't read it until, I needed to understand about nourishing food. And I read it cover to cover in a cornerstone of diets for centuries that spans cultures as bone broth. And it was missing from the modern diet. And so I went on a 5-week bone broth diet where I rebuilt my digestion from the inside out. Bone broth was not the only thing I consumed, but it was in copious amounts. I kind of fell in love with how easy it was to make it taste like anything. It's a very neutral palate. And that's really when Fond was born. Most people get to the point of well, how do you know there's even a market for this, right? Before they're bringing this. And when you have an experience like I did with Fond, you share it, right? I was drinking bone broth. I felt better than I felt in my entire life. And I wanted people to have that experience too. So I kept telling them, drink bone broth, make bone broth. And they would look at me like, you are out of your mind. And, there were two things that people said. It's too long to make it. And when I make it, it doesn't even taste good. And that's about effort, right? And success. Like if I'm going to spend all this time, and it's not even going to taste good, then that is not an investment I'm going to make. And so my bone broth tasted good. I was loving to drink it. And I said, there's nothing really that exists like this on the market. There's rehydrated concentrates, there is a rehydrated powder right on the shelf, but there is not a true bone broth that exists. And this was in 13. And so really from there, it was a road of testing and trying things out. And then in 2015, after taking the plunge on renting a commercial kitchen, we had the night shift, Roberta. So not only did we have 2 young kids, but we were running the night shift at a restaurant because no one was in there making our bone broth. And
My gosh.
it was insane. And we brought our broth to the farmer's market. My husband dropped me off just like, praying that he wouldn't pick me up in tears. And I had a huge sign that said sold out. And it was just an amazing experience to really create something that truly helps people, really meets them at the core of nourishment, which is that it's delicious, their body knows how to use it, and it's full of things that the body needs to repair, right? Or make cells in the body full of amino acids, collagen, gelatin. And so if we could give them something that was good for them, that tasted good, that was a win-win. And so we really haven't looked back from there. That was 11 years ago. And for listeners who, are keeping up with the story, 13 years later, I never needed that second surgery. So I am literally
Wow.
living proof of the power of a nutrient-rich diet.
Yeah. Can we back it up to where you said you worked for a tech startup? Was that in preparation because you knew you wanted to start something and getting that background, or that wasn't even on in your mind?
No, it wasn't even in my mind. I was freshly out of college needing a job and got an interview, and it started as an internship with this company and really fell in love with making something out of nothing, right? This company was doing something that had not been done before, and the creative challenge for me was how to communicate and connect to the customer through storytelling, right? And I really fell in love with that. And that's a lot of what I do today still at Fond, is helping people understand why they need these products and that they can trust me when I say that.
Yeah, yeah. And then you had 4 different businesses prior to starting Fond. What made you continue to kind of try?
So just to clarify, I had 4 business ideas. We did
Okay.
not do any of them. Fond was the only one that we felt really had a gap in the market where there wasn't a product that existed like this. And there's a lot of specialness in the way that we make Fond. And so we also knew that we were making it in a different way. We were making it artisanally. People could taste the difference. And so we never set out to be the biggest player in the market, but we set out to be the best. Absolutely. And that was the niche that I wanted to be in, was hands down the best bone broth you could buy on store shelves, sourced from the best farms here in the US, the best tasting. And that was really quality without compromise, was really what I wanted to own, even at scale, and to really show that you could do that well and scale a business doing that.
Yeah. When you started to make it at home, how long until you really got the process proper, coupled with the taste that you said was kind of difficult for a lot of people?
Yeah, I mean, when I would tell people I'm selling bone broth, I almost couldn't get them to sample it even,
Really?
right? And so it had to be, you're
Had
overcoming
to taste
so much. You're
good. Yeah.
overcoming a bias. You're overcoming, what the heck is this?
Right.
You're just,
Right.
people were really unsure back then. And it was about, a 2-year process from making it myself to realizing, and I tried to kill the idea several times. I was a young mom. I was already working, doing things that I loved, and yet I would wake up at 3 in the morning and write down I want to try this recipe in the bone broth next. And my sister remembers me texting pictures of, little bone broth tonics to her, and she was like, okay, this is from the person who wouldn't even eat chicken that had a bone in it. I mean, I was such a picky eater growing up. And here I am playing with chicken feet and trying to get the right ratios, and just, it was something that completely took me over, and I loved it. And so, yeah, it was about a 2-year process. But what was so interesting is the early farmers market days were so essential for our success on shelf, because by the time our product got on shelf at HEB, who, by the way, found us at the farmer's market, we had already gone through perfecting those formulas. There was no testing on shelf. We knew customers loved every single flavor that we were going to launch, and the ones that they didn't love, we didn't launch. I do encourage people, whether it's a farmer's market or some, small subscriber list that you can test things to. Those days were so crucial for us because by the time we made the investment to get on shelf, we already knew we had something that people loved and that was really special.
Yeah. What was that early feedback as you were at the farmers markets from consumers?
It really came down to sometimes it was too salty, sometimes it was, not salty enough, sometimes things were too spicy or not spicy enough. I mean, it was really dialing in almost that instant feedback. We would tweak things and they would notice, or we would try a flavor and it wouldn't land as well as a different flavor did. And so what was great is it was a R&D playing ground at a pretty low expense for us to really dial in. These are the flavors people love. These are the ingredients they're connecting with. Shiitake and sage, turmeric and cracked pepper, and lemon and garlic are three of our best-selling flavors that have been bestsellers since those farmers market days.
With everyone having kind of their own opinion, right, as they're sampling, how do you intake the right information to then make adjustments?
Yeah. So we ran 5 different farmers markets in 3 different cities for 5 years. So what you track is over time, yes, you have the through lines where you can develop some statistic relevancy, right? Where enough people have said, oh, I love this one, or you notice when you sample this one, that's really the only time people buy it. If they're not able to try it first, there's a barrier in some of the ingredients where they're not buying it if you're not sampling it. And since you don't always have the opportunity or it's additional expense to sample on store shelves, there are products that we have not launched in stores because they require to sample first to buy them. So those are the kinds of things. But yeah, I think, some of the questions, what's fascinating to me is 11 years into this business, there's more that's similar than has changed. I mean, the way that we make the products are the exact same. Some of the best sellers are the exact same. We've added product lines for sure that have done really well since those farmers market days. But the questions of how can I trust this? How do I know, this is going to be good for me? Does it taste good? I mean, taste is such a huge obstacle for people to overcome with healthy food, that's one that, people tell us that it's the best tasting bone broth, best tasting tallow, pork lard they've had. And really that comes down to the artistry and the ingredients.
I would say over the course of probably maybe 6 to 7 years, bone broth has been kind of talked about, educated on from a consumer standpoint, but of course not when you started. So how was that in educating? Because you're trying to get them to taste something that is a little bit foreign, right? But also educating them on the benefits that are so powerful for, a person's body. How did you handle that? How did you manage that?
Yeah. So I think, you have to be really fast in your communication. And the farmers market days were such a great trial by fire for it. I mean, people would literally walk away mid-sentence if I didn't say it fast enough. And so it makes you have to refine that pitch. And what we relied on early was intrigue. Try our bone broth. And people were like, what? What is bone broth? On shelf, it's different. You can certainly grab their attention, but when you have that person-to-person interaction, you can really get them to come over by asking you a question. What is bone broth? So I'm saying something and then they are giving me their time and attention by asking me a question, coming over to the booth. And so I would explain, oh, bone broth spans cultures and centuries, but it's missing from the modern diet. Why is it missing? Oh, because of convenience culture. People used to use this as part of animal stewardship. Huh. Would you like to try it? And that was just, I mean, we really had to learn the things that worked and the pain points. But taste has been one consistently. A lot of people have, now that people know what bone broth is, a lot of our customers come to us after having a bad experience with a cheaper bone broth first. And so it's been an interesting shift. And now we're not necessarily educating on what bone broth is or why it's good for you. It's sort of made its way into the culture of, okay, yes, I understand bone broth is good for me at some level, or I've seen it at the store. My friend drinks it, right? There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
But what if it doesn't taste good? And that's something that we've had to solve from the beginning. And a lot of our labels went into that, a lot of the flavors that we lead with. One of the downsides in the beginning was we cared so much that people knew they were botanical infusions like coffee or tea, that sometimes people would be like, is this honey? Is this jam? Like, they couldn't understand that it was a meat product that was so botanically forward.
Yeah. Yeah. So HEB you said was the first retailer that found you at the farmers market. Prior to them coming to your booth, was retail even in your peripheral?
No, we had one local health food store that asked us if they could sell the product on shelf. So prior to HEB, we had one health food store in New Braunfels that we were in when we were not at the farmers market. And we had some early success. Like we won a grant from the La Dame de Escoffier in San Antonio to buy a bigger brew pot. We won an award from the Austin Food and Wine Alliance. These are local things, just like encouragement that we knew we were onto something. But it wasn't until the buyer at HEB said, "Hey, I really want you to submit for Quest for Texas Best. I really want you to put your hat in the ring." And then we went on to, we didn't, win the whole thing, but we won a People's Choice Award. And that relationship was so foundational to navigating how to get on shelf, what buyer requirements are. It actually took us 2 years after we won that award to be on shelf.
And why that time frame of 2 years?
So when we were manufacturing the product ourselves, we did not have the equipment we had the equipment, but we didn't have the expert in the room to prove that it was safe, shelf stable, even though it was. So it was this massive expense. There was a ton of gatekeeping in this area where people didn't want to share thermal processing authority because they wanted the competitive advantage. And so we had to sell these products under refrigeration. And HEB was just really clear, we don't think a refrigerated bone broth is going to have a market or have a big market. And so when we actually, it's a crazy story, but we actually got no from Whole Foods, no from Central Market, and no from HEB on our refrigerated line, all within 2 to 3 days of each other. And so we decided, we had $10,000 loan that we took out for the business. We decided to let the staff go, to just run down. I mean, we thought we were closing shop because there was no large market for this. And the next day, someone reached out to us and said, "Hey, we just acquired this farm. We have the thermal process to make your bone broth shelf stable. Would you ever be interested in that?"
My gosh.
And you can't make it up at the highs and the lows. We were just like, we thought we were going to have
Is that
business. We were like, yes, we would be interested in that. And so ended up going out there, training them on how to make it over a long period of time. And then by December of 2019, we had product on shelf with HEB.
wow. So you hadn't lost that opportunity. You were able to call them back up and give, the fact that now you can actually make it shelf stable.
Yep. Yep. So that's what I mean. I mean, HEB was a great partner
That's
in
great.
that
Yeah.
and really cared that, as they had, I think when you have a great idea and you have initial success, sometimes founders can think they deserve a place on shelf. And that place on shelf is earned. Like we had meetings with the buyers. Originally, our labels, now they're very strongly associated with one color. Really, previously they were illustration forward, but if you weren't paying attention, some of the
You didn't
illustrations
know.
kind of look the same. And the buyer was very clear, you need to pass the honey-do list. Honey, go get me the fond green one, right? And so we had this total shift and we were like, oh. And so we did a lot of that work before we got on shelf. There were things in our ingredient list that they were like, hey, I know your farmers market people liked to see chicken feet. The HEB customer will put it back on the shelf if they see chicken feet on the label. So it was really interesting to how do we stay full of integrity and have our identity as a brand and also satisfy these things that these people with a lot more experience than we have. We also want to protect the investment
Right.
in getting on shelf. And so I'm happy that we were good listeners in that way.
Yeah. That's great that they were really able to help educate you on the right way to go to shelf versus getting there and then having to make those adjustments based on, not seeing maybe some sales that you had expected.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a special relationship for sure.
Yeah. When it comes to the pitch and you pitching to HEB to get your product on shelf, what did that look like for you?
So with HEB, since they came to us, that was different. But I would say with Sprouts, so I'll use Sprouts as an example. I really wanted people that were in an existing category and were a new entrant. How are we different? And we really talked about our sourcing and how we were made. And those two things made a store like Sprouts understand this is the type of product that our customers are looking for and that we actually want to have on shelf. And so I think it's understanding as a founder, you have two customers. You have the customer in the store, but you also, the retailer is your customer also. And you need to understand what they are trying to offer to their customer base. We also knew we weren't going to necessarily win the velocity game, although velocity, which is, the speed at which you turn SKUs on shelf. There were some legacy brands that we were not going to win on that, but we could win on the dollars contributed per basket. And so we were careful to talk through, hey, you would have to sell 6 cartons of this to make what you can sell with 1 jar of Fond. And so we also were strategic about our strengths. We have been very clear that we're not trying to be available to everyone. We wanted to address the need in the market, which was a product that was not made from concentrate, was not rehydrated, had no yeasts in it or yeast extracts, but was actually a 1-to-1 ratio of bones to water made just like you would make it at home. And the story really connected. We're selling into KeHE at the worst time. COVID, things are shut down. I can't meet with any of the KeHE representatives. But KeHE was really innovative during that time. And I'll never forget my broker and I think we did 8 hours of Zoom calls one day. They were 30 minutes each, and we just did round tables with each region of KeHE reps. And we couldn't meet them in person, but we could meet them, face to face via Zoom. And I shared the story and I shared the story and I shared the story. And people really connect with a product born from need.
Mm-hmm.
There were some KeHE representatives that said they were in tears after I shared my founding story and how this came about. And I think our desire to actually truly bring products that make a difference to the store shelves is something everyone wants to be a part of and say, yes, these are the products that we want to have in our stores.
Yeah, it's part of what makes you unique and different, right? And added value to the shelf.
Yes.
So with the addition, you mentioned Sprouts as kind of a second retailer that you took on. How did you know when you were ready to go to another retailer?
This is where I really encourage founders to develop relationships with your buyers that are transformational, not transactional. And I know it's hard. I know there's a lot of people that they are servicing, but people can tell when you're in it for the transaction or real connection, real relationship. And I talked about it with our buyer at HEB, and I said, KeHE wants to bring us in, and I'm considering going distribution. And he said, is this the path you want to take? And I said, will HEB continue to buy Fond? And he said, yeah, we'll continue to support you. If this is how you're going to go, if you are going to go mass distribution, then I will support you. And I think this is the right call. And so, to me, taking a risk to go into KeHE wasn't worth it if I was going to lose all of HEB's business and there were things I wasn't willing to do. Right. And so I think I'll never forget someone told me, a mentor of mine in this space, your no's are more important than your yeses. And that turned things on its head for me. I was like, what do you mean? I say yes every chance I can. And he was like, no. You need to be really careful. And you need to say no more than you say yes. And so HEB once again helped us navigate that transition, became an anchor for us in several DCs, right, that KeHE was already servicing. And so it was a really beautiful thing, but we couldn't have done that without them. And so they were on board with Fond growing. They wanted the mission to grow. And, to this day are still a huge advocate of the brand, which is so special to me.
Yeah. I think also that's a testament to just being transparent with your retailer. I'm sure definitely what you did in talking to them, telling them kind of your vision of growth felt more like you were still partnering with them versus ending up on, 5,000 additional retail shelves and they don't even know until they see it in shelf. So I think that's definitely a great takeaway.
Yeah, to your point, and you're so right for mentioning this, they continued to see. I have a handwritten note from the vice president of HEB. They found us at a retailer in New York And he was like, "Your win is our win. We can't believe that you started in our stores." And it's on my
Wow.
desk. That's because yeah, if you can bring people along with you and your win is their win too, then there's not this competitive, "Oh, well, hey, there is plenty of room.
Yeah.
There are plenty of customers."
How did you manage inventory as you were growing and being added into so many additional retail channels?
So, 2 hires that I made that were transformative for Fond. Also, a little bit of another health detour here, but I developed Lyme disease after running the manufacturing facility and having 4 kids. It was just too much. It was a blessing in disguise that we ended up shutting it down, and I knew I needed help. I was doing it alone until that point. And so in 2019, we brought on, early 2020, actually, we brought on a COO, and her name is Tara, and she has definitely been an incredible co-pilot and really helped us on the inventory, the ordering, and then quickly it became a lot for Tara. So within 2 years, we had to make another hire, and we're a company, we're doing like $5 million in sales, and we hire a VP of demand planning and operational sales, which is pretty specific.
Mm.
But that's what we needed. We needed someone who could look at our demand planning per SKU and help us on the operational sales side of the company. And because we were selling on multiple channels. We were available on Amazon. We had our own Shopify store. We were available on mom and pop shops through direct to retail, and we had distributors. So we were effectively running 4 businesses where you're having to manage inventory at multiple warehouses. One of the biggest ways that you can lose cash is having too many warehouses and too many products that aren't moving fast enough in those warehouses. And so Jim came on to join the team. He recently became our chief sales officer, still with the company, doing amazing things. And so I think it's also as a founder realizing, hey, I can't do this alone, and knowing when to bring those people on. And unfortunately for me, I had to come to the end of myself and again succumb to Lyme disease to make that decision. But I was better about seeing it as time went on. Okay, this is when I need help. I can't get to the place of chronic illness again. So
Did you have any mentors that helped guide you in who you should be hiring and what those roles should consist of?
So I did. The only investment that Fond has really taken on has been through really one super angel in San Antonio, and then a group of smaller angels that we've done safe rounds with. And so what's interesting about us is we never did an institutional round of funding. When I was doing the Series A was when Fond had the facility burned to the ground, and I couldn't finish because I didn't know if our business even had a future. So we've only done, funding rounds through a group of super angels. And he was such an amazing mentor to me, really helped me with hiring Tara and helped me to interview her and just really make sure she was the right person to come in. And then, we brought on, he interviewed Jim as well. And so it was really important having someone who I trusted completely, who had a vested interest in Fond's success. I think that's the best. The best investors don't just give cash. Sometimes, people say they only want that, but there's so much more that you can get with the right partner than just a cash infusion.
You mentioned and kind of breezed over your facility catching on fire. Can you tell us a little bit about what happened there?
Yeah, yeah. So this is when we are with the co-man. So it was their facility and their warehouse, but it was all of our raw goods, all of the bones, all of the labels, all of the lids, all of the jars, all of the work in progress inventory, all of the ready to ship. And so as I mentioned, I was in the middle of raising a Series A. I had more meetings in my investment banker's history than anyone else he had worked with. And, in a day, I got a call at 6 in the morning, September 19th, 2022. And Tara said to me, there's been a fire. The facility is gone. It completely burned to the ground, and so did the warehouse.
Gosh.
And that began one of the hardest chapters of my life. I mean, just totally brutal, for myself, for the team. But we were previously growth at all costs, right? We had gotten into HEB. We said yes to a lot of opportunities. We had spent money and free fills to get on shelf. And now I was frantically clamoring, telling HEB there's been a fire. I don't know when we're going to be able to ship product. Please don't take us off shelf. Sprouts, and just really, really, really hard. And I'll never forget the buyer at Sprouts said to me, and Jim and I, we wrote him this email, we recorded this video, and he said to us, Fond will be like the phoenix. You will raise from the ashes. And Jim and I we just cried after that call because we were they were such a huge part of our business. It was like, if they say no, it just became absolute triage. Okay, what do we do next? And what do we do next? And that's how we got through it. And one of the things that came out of that I share is that, we were not able to obviously garner any investment because the facility, we had no way to make product. And so
Right.
I was able to go back to our investment team and got a $3 million loan to rebuild the company and had to pledge my equity as the guarantee for the loan. There were no assets in the business.
Oh my gosh. I think that's also like what you were just saying, how the buyers actually were like, we're here for you. We'll wait. We understand is definitely connected, I feel like, to what you were saying. Like find a buyer, a retailer that really is pulling for you, that is supporting you, not thinking of you as transactional, so that when things like that happen, they're still rooting for you and they're still there to support you, even if there is kind of a lull, right, in anything.
Yeah. Yeah. There
Yeah.
are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be bumps in the road. There just are. And so that's why having these relationships be true relationships, and where your buyer understands your mission and your vision and the specialness of your product, and they're still rooting for you when things are hard. So yeah, 18 months later, we launched our tallow line. It was something we had been working on for a long time, but with the fire had to delay that a little bit. We lost over $4 million in the fire, but because it wasn't our facility and our location, our insurance payout was $150,000
Gosh, off of $4 million in inventory. Oh my gosh.
in loss. So it was devastating, and the fact that we're here today is just, incredible and really special. And our tallow is number one in seller and number one contributor to growth in the natural channel. Our bone broth is growing in a category that we've been on shelf in since 2019, 48% year over year. The tallow is up 98%. And so I think what you just see is customers are connecting with quality. They are voting for this with their dollars, and
Mhm.
we're just so grateful to be able to be here today to meet them in that need.
You had a pretty major setback. What made you personally be able to overcome that and not just give up?
Yeah, a lot of people ask me that, and I think for better or worse, it wasn't ever in my mind to stop. A lot of people ask me why we kept going, and I just never considered that we wouldn't try to at least see it through. And I didn't really have a reason for believing we would get out of it, but I felt a responsibility at minimum to our customers and to our investors to try. And, we did one of the biggest blessings that came out of this catastrophic experience is having to pivot to be default alive. It's very hard to do in the CPG industry because there's inventory and your cash conversion cycle can be very different, completely depending on your channel that you're selling in. But we had to become profitable basically overnight. We launched an internal initiative called Break It and Rebuild It. We had the $3 million line of credit that I spoke about that we could, but it has to be paid back. So we had to use it with caution and wisely. And I'm proud to say that, this year we were able to remove the personal equity guarantee and fix that line of credit with assets in the business. So yeah, it was never a thought to me to not try to come out of it.
Yeah. And then coming out of it, starting in a whole new category with tallow, where did that idea come from? And what made you feel ready to even enter into a whole nother category?
Yeah, so when things stabilized with the broth and we were on shelf again and we could see that velocity was increasing, and another thing that came out of the fire was that we had no more inventory. So we had been waiting to make the transition to only a verified regenerative product, but we had all this inventory we had to work through. Well, not anymore. It all burned. It was gone. So it made our ability to change immediately almost to a regenerative verified product. Now, every single product we bought, every single input, on the meat side from that was already verified regenerative. So it clarified our positioning. I think it would have been a longer transition. We still would have made it, but it helped accelerate that in some ways because it was easy. We had to start over.
Right.
And if we were going to start over, we were going to do it this way. And so in, the regenerative space, we're always using everything we can from the animal. And so tallow, I wanted to call it flavored meat butter. So aren't we glad that, first iterations don't make it to shelf? But tallow is this beautiful, it's so multi-purpose. You can use it on your face and on your steak. How many things can you say that about? It's incredible. It's good for you, and it uses more of the animal. And so it was always in the pipeline. Our goal is to make our partnering farms as revenue rich as possible by buying inputs that they sometimes are composting, sometimes are burning, sometimes we're going to pet food, at like for cents per pound. And so we can take those and turn them into beautiful, nourishing products that we need. We actually vitally need these nutrients in our nutrient depleted diets. And so we ended up launching tallow really at a perfect time. I would say when we launched bone broth, the category was already taking off. There were already major players, and we really came in as the best option in that category, the premium in the space. And our tallow is no different. We're still artisanal, dry rendered. So many beautiful things about this product, but we hit it in a wave where the consumer, the timing was perfect. And we could not have known some of the things that would happen. Albertsons approached us about having the tallow on shelf. That was a really big step for Fond. It was our first kind of step outside of the natural channel. Do we think we can have success here?
Yeah.
And it's been an amazing experiment. So
With bone broth, more awareness, like we talked about over the course of the past couple of years, and definitely tallow, I think is one that even restaurants are boasting about it and having advertisement around it. That I would imagine had natural growth for you. But what are the other things that you have done that have been successful and continue to do to drive awareness and traffic to your brand?
I was really clear that in a place that was, when we launched, heavily paleo and sort of more carnivore, and there was a lot of masculine branding. I remember one of our early marketing taglines was, just because you eat like a cave woman doesn't mean you have to look like one. Like, we really wanted to bring a feminine side to this space.
Yeah.
And, the predominant shopper in grocery stores is our girl.
Yeah.
And she is making the decisions for the family. And I wanted her to have something beautiful that would just stop her mid-browse and be like, that is just pretty. And even if I don't buy that, I think that is beautiful, and that added value to my day. And so we were very, very much biased towards the female shopper, still are. We love our male customer base and definitely add value to their lives, but we're very clear about being there for the female shopper who is doing most of the shopping, who candidly a lot of people don't talk to. And a lot of our customer base is actually women who are starting to age, and they want to age gracefully. And it's interesting because society kind of tells her that she is approaching her peak value, or it's going to start going down, as she ages. And we fundamentally disagree and cherish her. And she's a cornerstone of our customer base. And so I'm very clear about going after her. And I think that helps our positioning, that we were made for her and continue to want to serve her.
And how do you connect with her?
So I think, in a lot of ways, by making her life easier. So I have this, Fond is one of the easiest cheats you can do to make anything better and more nourishing for you and your family. You can, by drinking it, in the morning, you are giving yourself collagen, gelatin, amino acids, electrolytes, which help with everything in the body, including hair, teeth, skin, nails, right? Glycine to support your nervous system and so many other things. And then the fats, what's so interesting, as a culture, we are like so concerned about fats, but fats are an essential nourishment. And as a culture, we're remembering, this helps with skin barrier. This helps with cell integrity. And so we really try to make life easier for her by making it easy to eat healthy. So many of us do not have time to render a pot of bone broth or render, tallow or simmer a pot of bone broth. We might have time to make sourdough, or we probably buy kombucha every once in a while. But
Right.
especially for, the moms who are juggling multiple children and a career, we want to make taking care of herself and taking care of others easy and delicious.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about the barrier from a taste perspective. Do any of the retailers allow you to sample? And is that something that's part of your regimen?
Yeah, so it is, and we do, and we love sampling, and it's definitely an unlock for us. But I will say, just talking to your audience here, we knew it could not be a requirement of us being successful on shelf. Like, it was an additive, it would increase velocities, but we had to get our customers' attention. We had to make the jars look so delicious and appealing. And part of our part of our thing is you can actually see the color of the broth and the tallow. The label does not cover the whole part of the jar. I mean, we are very transparent. We try to encourage trust in our consumers with that. We're not hiding anything from you. You're not going to see the color the first time you puncture the box and now you can't return it.
Has there been anything surprising for you as you started to get into retail shelves that you kind of had no idea until your product was actually on shelf?
Yes, I did not want to launch a pure and unflavored bone broth. I thought it was against everything that Fond was. Fond was whimsy and beauty and deliciousness. And we clearly saw in the data that 80% of sales in a certain category were happening in unflavored. And we were like, we have to play there. We have to serve our customer there. And so data-driven decisions have influenced our product pipeline to where now our pure and unflavored line is our best-selling bone broth. And at first, that like made me sad a little bit that is the one. But there's also a specialness and a uniqueness about we're the only bone broth that is just bone, salt, and water. Like not even carrots or celery. And so many people have so many dietary restrictions
Yeah.
and concerns that these products are really hitting someone. Also, if you want a bone broth to cook with and you don't want to have to worry about it affecting the flavor of your dish, these pure and unflavored are very palate neutral. So that was one that was very surprising. I'm a flavor girl myself. You can never have too much of it, but I love that we did this. I love that they're runaway. And I love that, my team was able to show me the data that influenced this decision.
Yeah. When you talk about team, what does your team look like today? How many people work for Fond?
So we're small. We're small. Our actual like full-time employees are 6, and it includes, our COO, our CSO, a CFO, and my husband and I. And those are the full-time crew. And we've got some amazing contractors that feel like family. We've been working with them for years. But I think, don't be afraid to be lean. One of the things that I loved, there was a company that sold kind of early on in Fond's career, and it sold for like $12 million. There were 2 guys working in it. And I was like, yeah,
Right.
like I want to go as far as I can with that. And, because as you grow and you have more employees, that's responsibility. Eventually we're going to have to add to our team. But we've been able to grow a nationwide brand with, less than 10 employees, which is special.
Yeah, very special. And with that, you're homeschooling 6 children, 6 kids. How are you managing raising your children, being a wife, as well as running a company?
Yeah, so I think, one of the things I want people to hear is that my husband made his dream also the Fond dream. And I mean that sincerely. He has been a deep part of the branding, but there's no denying that he came alongside to support me and has just been an incredible, incredible advocate, provider for me, like mentally, emotionally, keeping our families safe, even when things in the business felt really scary. So he's incredible. He helps with the kids. So I do Latin and English and spelling, and he does math and science. And so there's division of labor. And we also did 2 years in a classical charter school. We thought, man, maybe sometimes you just got to see what the other side of life is like.
Right.
And, I tell people, choose your hard. Choose your hard. One of my best friends says that to me. And it was harder for us to navigate for pickup and drop, because we only have 4 school age kids now 5 this last year, 5 school age kids, but so, packing all their lunches every day, waiting in the pickup line. There are parts of the modern school system that just are not ideal for large families. Not all of our kids could engage in every single after school activity, right? I remember one year, my oldest, during baseball season, I would see him for an hour. Between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m., I would see him for an hour at night during baseball season.
Oh my gosh.
And it's just not the life we wanted to live. And
Yeah.
so just as in your business, you have to make the decisions that are right for your business and your team. And you can learn from other people, but comparison is not always helpful,
Mhm.
right? We had to make the decision that was right for our family. And so there's a lot about homeschooling that's efficient. There's a lot about homeschooling that allows for other opportunities, like our kids can learn an instrument as well as play in a club sport, and we still see them, whereas we didn't when they were in the school system. So we loved our time there. It was not the right fit for us. And, we completed a full year of homeschooling this May after having that experience, and are happy with the decision that we made.
Yeah. What I love about that too is that you're creating the life that you guys want to live, and it doesn't have to your point, it doesn't have to be like your neighbor, right? It can be whatever brings you joy and you feel is most supporting your kids and seeing them and doing all the things that you love for your life.
Yeah. Yeah. I really want people to own their decisions. There's nothing worse than, 15 years down the road being like, how did I get here?
Yeah.
And feeling like you had no participation in that. And that can happen so easily if you're not really taking responsibility for the decisions or having agency in those decisions.
So what is next for Fond Regenerative?
I'm really excited. We're launching a line of snacks. We were really, really thoughtful, very, very thoughtful. These products will have taken 24 months by the time they're on market. So, I mean, that's the other thing. Like, I will not launch something if it is not the best of the best. And that's just our customers deserve nothing less. That's what they've come to expect from us in every single product. And so, we are indeed a line of tallow skincare that you will never see because it didn't meet my standards, and that's okay. We've done some things that won't make it to shelf, and we've done some things that we're really proud of and that we can't wait to launch. And so really excited for those to come out. And I think we also really want to help Fond be a household name. And I don't mean that selfishly. I mean that in the sense of like everyone can participate in better nourishment. We really are looking to innovate in products that are premium, best of the best, made without compromise, and are a lower cost of entry than, our jarred bone broth line. So we're always looking for innovation along those lines as well, of how can we invite more people to the table? How can we lower the barrier of entry to our products?
Yeah, I think what's cool about that too is however you want to enter this space, we're kind of creating those moments and that type of product that fits your needs. Now that you are not at farmers markets, how do you ensure that the products before they go to shelf are really right for your brand and something consumers really want?
So there's a lot that we do here. Sometimes I envy those farmers market days, but we also do this with a retail partner. I like to advise people to take really big risks in small markets. So, for example, one of our snacks line will launch in one retailer in one region, and that is how they will be introduced. And that's where we'll get customer feedback. We've done a lot of data, we've gotten feedback from customers before we've launched, but there's nothing like getting it into customers' hands and having that feedback firsthand. So big risks, small markets, and then grow from there. It's the same thing, it's just at a different scale, right? We're
Yeah.
doing the same thing we did at the farmers market days, but now it happens on a little bit of a bigger stage.
I think that's such great advice, honestly. I haven't heard that before. Like just starting at that one store, especially if you're going into something that's a whole new category and utilizing those things, same things that you did at the farmers market, testing it out, getting some samples, getting feedback and being able to adjust in a smaller scale versus going everywhere and then finding out maybe you need to add more salt or whatever that could look like.
Yes, yes, at 100%. So
So, where can our listeners continue to hear your journey, follow the story, support, and most importantly, buy Fond?
So you can buy us at fondregenerative.com. We are sold at Sprouts and Whole Foods nationwide. As well, our tallow is in Albertsons nationwide, and we are on Amazon with a few of our SKUs as well. And then you can follow us. We have an Instagram and a TikTok, Fond Regenerative. And if you're interested in learning more about my story, it's Alysa Seeland at Alysa Seeland. And I just post about being a mom and raising a business and raising the boys along with it.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Elisa, for coming on Shelf Talks.
Thank you for having me. It was
Yes,
beautiful to be on it.
I love that.